Alright, so this integumentary system chapter is pretty short and easy. Let's see. So skin is an organ because skin is made up of different types of tissues. And so remember that was the definition of an organ. Another name for skin is cutaneous. And so we're going to see that the integumentary system is made up of skin, hair, nails, glands, and sensory receptors. The skin has three main layers: epidermis, dermis, and hypodermis. And so here we're seeing in the epidermis, what I want you to know here, let me open this up. The epidermis is made up of stratified squamous epithelium. And then for the dermis, know that the dermis is made up of areolar and dense irregular tissues. We're going to see that the areolar is right below the epidermis, and then the dense irregular makes up the rest of the dermis. And the hypodermis, this one is underneath the dermis, and this contains a lot of areolar, but mostly. And here we're seeing a picture of the skin, and it shows the three different layers. Again, the epidermis is made up of the stratified squamous epithelium. The basement membrane just refers to the areolar tissue that is right below it. There are no blood vessels in epidermis, and that is actually the characteristic of epithelial tissue. Because the cells are so close to each other, no blood vessels can pass in between. The deepest part of it is called the stratum basale. Stratum just means a layer, and basale means the base layer. And so in this deeper part of the epidermis, there are blood vessels, which then supply the upper cells. In the stratum basale, the cells are regenerated here, and as they grow, they are pushed toward the surface by the newly formed cells. And at the top, the cells, and actually I should point this out, keratinocyte just means the skin cell in the epidermis. As the cells go up to the surface, they begin to flatten and die. Keratinization, we're going to see, keratinization is when the cells make this special protein called keratin. And this keratin protein is very important. It allows our skin to become stronger and also prevents dehydration. Okay, so the 5 layers of the epidermis, so that stratum basale was mentioned before. So the things that I want you to know here: stratum corneum, know that this is the top layer, and this has the dead keratinized cells. Stratum lucidum, this one is found only in thick skin, meaning in the palms and the soles. Stratum granulosum, this layer is when the cells are making keratin, which is what keratinization means. Stratum spinosum, here the cells look a little different. There isn't really much special about this. But then know that the stratum basale, also known as the germinativum, this is the deepest layer. Mitotic layer means that it makes new cells here. Also in the epidermis, we have melanocytes. These cells make melanin. Right. And again, the site in this, site means cell, so meaning melanin cells. Melanin takes the UV light and prevents the UV light from damaging our DNA inside our cells. Indoor tanning can lead to skin cancer. So our book talks a little bit about this. But again, know that melanomas, if it is cancer of the melanocytes, know that that is called melanomas. The next layer, the dermis. Dermis has, if you notice, in between the epidermis and the dermis, you are seeing this curvy line here. This curvy line is called the dermal papillae. Our fingerprints are just the deeper indentations of these dermal papillae. In the dermis, as we saw in that slide at the beginning, the two tissues making up dermis, the areolar and the dense irregular. There are nerve cells here, there are blood vessels here, there are hair follicles, sweat glands, and sebaceous glands we're going to learn. And then there are also these receptors that pick up touch pressure information. Okay, but again, the main thing here, know that the two tissues, areolar and dense irregular, make up this dermis layer. I actually don't ask the two different layers in the dermis, but the papillary layer, that is the top layer, reticular layer, the deeper layer. Reticular layer is made up of the dense irregular. Okay, so now the different things that are found in the skin. We're going to go over the hair follicles, nails, and then the glands. Nails, for this one, we don't need to know the different parts of the nails. The main thing that I want you to know is that nails are actually just an extension of the epidermis. It's just the hardened version of our epidermis. The keratin protein here is stronger. Hair follicles. Hair follicle just means this is where the hair develops, from which, we'll just underline this, from which the hair develops. And for this also, we don't need to know all the different parts of the hair follicle. Just know that this is where the hair is developing from. Hair color is given by melanin. It gives our skin color, but also our hair color. But here at the bottom, I do want you to know this, erector pili. This is a muscle that is attached to all of our hair follicles. Okay, so just imagine at the bottom where the hair is attached. And they put it here, it's not the best picture, but here this muscle attaches the hair follicle and it attaches to the epidermis. And so when it contracts, it pulls on the hair follicle and allows our hairs to stand up. And so this muscle is what gives us goosebumps. Our book talks a little bit about hair loss, how it can be genetic, but also it could be lower level of testosterone. The one at the bottom is just showing how some people have this condition. It's an immune system disorder. So here the antibodies are actually attacking these people's hair follicles. Sebaceous glands. These are holocrine glands, meaning that the cells in these glands rupture and then they release their contents. Sebaceous glands make sebum. Sebum is a fatty material. It's oily. And so this is what makes our skin oily, our hair oily, but it does keep our hair and skin soft, waterproof. You can also know that the sebaceous glands are attached to the hair follicles. You can see here. Sweat glands. There are these different sweat glands here. The main sweat gland is the eccrine gland. Eccrine gland releases through Mercrine way of secretion, meaning through exocytosis. And so eccrine, or the Mercrine glands, these are the normal sweat glands. When we get hot, these are activated by the control center, which is the brain. Then we also have these apocrine sweat glands. Know that these are different ones, a little different, but these are found in the armpits and the groin areas. Ceruminous glands are also a type of sweat gland. Know that these make earwax, and the mammary glands make milk. Skin's function, so of course it is a protective covering. It prevents any microorganisms from going into our skin. But also the very important one, it prevents water loss. Because that keratin, the protein that is inside our skin cells, it prevents the water from escaping through our skin, but also from entering through our skin. So just think, if each time you go swimming or you take a bath, if water was able to come in through your skin and into your body, you would just swell up, right? But your skin prevents that from doing. And your skin is also preventing water from just escaping. Now don't think about the sweat glands. Sweat glands, remember, are only activated when the body temperature is high. But if you are dehydrated, sweat glands would never get activated. Okay, so just keep in mind that the skin is keeping the water in and also prevents it from just going into our body. And you can see here some of the other functions as well. Heat production and loss. And so again, if you are hot, then you sweat. And so here it's saying when the body is too warm, I do want you to know here, vasodilation of dermal blood vessels occurs. This means that the blood vessels get thicker they get closer to the surface and it's easier for the heat to escape from the blood vessels. So vasodilation of thermal blood vessels occurs. The deeper blood vessels are instead going through vasoconstriction, meaning that they become even smaller, thinner to keep that inner core temperature kind of stable. So this is just to kind of balance it out. And also, of course, sweat glands then increase sweat production. The opposite would then occur if the body temperature falls. Hyperthermia versus hypothermia. None of these is good for our body. Our nervous system wants a good stable temperature. Don't worry about the details on this slide. Inflammation, something that occurs with our tissues. Inflammation, its job is to prevent, restrict the spread of infection. Because what happens here, when there is an injury, blood vessels in this area, they dilate, meaning that they get wider, thicker. So when they get wider, and also I should say little openings come up in the walls of the blood vessels, and here our white blood cells are able to leave the blood vessels and go to the injury site. So let me show this to you on the picture, and also there's a video that I like to watch on what inflammation is. Okay, so this picture from our book is not the best, but what it's saying is here there's a wound you can see on the first picture. The red lines are the blood vessels. So here these white circles are the white blood cells. And so what it's showing here is when there's an injury, white blood cells leave the blood vessels and go to the injury site. And so I'll just say here again, I'll write it here, inflammation. This just shows that the immune cells, white blood cells, oops, sorry about that, go to the injury site. And so then they go to the injury site and get rid of the bacteria there, and they get rid of the dead cells, the injured cells, and they start the repair process. With the burns, we need to know just what the first degree, second degree, third degree burns refer to. First degree burn, know that this only affects the epidermis. Second degree burn, so here just think second, think 2. Second degree burns affect the epidermis and part of the dermis. And also with the second degree burns, blisters may form. And with the third degree burn, here now think 3 layers. Third degree burn, epidermis, dermis, and the hypodermis. Fourth degree burn is if the burn goes down to the muscle. Sounds very, very painful. Rule of nines, what they did is to determine or I should say estimate the amount of the burn on the body. They basically divided the body surface into these regions. Okay, then our book, at the end of basically every chapter, talks about what happens as we get older. So it says here the cell cycle slows, skin becomes scaly, age spots appear, our skin layers become thinner, fat, even though I know we do gain weight as we get older, but in that subcutaneous, which is the same thing as the hypodermis, a little bit of fat is lost. Wrinkling occurs, sagging of skin, less oil is released from the sebaceous glands, melanin production slows, hair whitens. But yeah, so all kinds of depressing things about getting older.